The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, they looked up at the night sky and dreamed of what waited beyond. When they finally reached those stars, they found they were not alone. The galaxy was full of life. 17 different species had already built a great civilization called the Galactic Concord. Humanity was the youngest, the smallest, the weakest at least. That is what everyone believed. Park Joon-ho was only 12 years old when he first understood what it meant to be human in a galaxy that did not want humans. He stood beside his grandfather at the Great Hall on Mars, watching the signing of the Integration Treaty. This was supposed to be a moment of pride. Humanity was finally joining the galactic community. The Velthari ambassador was tall and thin, pale blue skin and eyes like black glass. He walked toward Joon-ho's grandfather, who was one of the human representatives. The old man smiled and extended his hand in greeting. The Velthari looked at the hand for a long moment. Then he spat on it. The room went silent. Joon-ho felt his face grow hot with anger. He wanted to scream. He wanted to fight. But his grandfather simply pulled out a cloth, wiped his hand clean, and continued smiling. Later that night, Joon-ho asked his grandfather why he did nothing. Why he let them treat him like dirt. The old man sat down and put his hand on the boy's shoulder.
"We wait," he said softly.
"We always wait. That is the human way. We are patient because we must be. One day you will understand." Joon-ho did not understand. Not then. But he remembered. 300 years passed. Humanity spread across the galaxy, but always to the places no one else wanted. Toxic worlds with poison air. Frozen rocks at the edge of known space. Planets with unstable cores that could explode at any time. The Concord gave humanity the scraps, and humanity took them without complaint. They had no choice. Human merchants paid 3 times the taxes of other species. Human ships were stopped and searched for no reason. Human diplomats were given seats in basement rooms while others sat in grand halls. Every day brought a new insult. Every year brought new humiliation. But humanity built on the poisoned world. They developed new technology to clean the air. On the frozen rocks, they created underground cities of warmth and light. On the unstable planets, they learned to predict earthquakes and volcanic eruptions with perfect accuracy. They solved problems that other species thought were impossible, and they did it all quietly. Without complaint, without drawing attention, Captain Yoon Mingi commanded the survey vessel Endurance. She was 43 years old and had spent 20 years exploring the edges of known space. Her job was to find new worlds for humanity to settle. The worst worlds. The ones the Concord rejected. She kept a personal log. Not of star systems or planetary data. She kept a log of every insult. Every slight. Every moment of disrespect. The Kethmari dock workers at Station 47, who called her crew soft meat and laughed when they walked past. The Drelvian inspector who tore apart her ship looking for violations that did not exist, then charged her for the repairs. The Velthari admiral who refused to shake her hand because touching a human was unclean. Minji wrote it all down. She never forgot. One night, her first officer asked her why she bothered. What was the point of recording insults they could never answer? Minji looked at him with calm eyes. Because one day, someone will want to know why, she said. One day they will ask what pushed us. And I want there to be a record. I want them to understand that we tried. We tried to be good neighbors. We tried to be patient. We swallowed our pride and our anger for 300 years. She closed her log and set it aside. When that day comes, no one will be able to say we did not give them every chance. The human colonies grew. Not fast, but steady. On a world called New Busousan, a young woman named Shin Hana arrived as part of the first settlement team. The planet was a hellscape of volcanoes and acid rain. The Concord had marked it as uninhabitable. They gave it to the humans as a joke. Hana did not laugh. She worked. For 40 years, she worked. She developed new methods to neutralize the acid in the soil. She created barriers to redirect lava flows. She built water purification systems and air filters and radiation shields. Piece by piece, year by year, she turned hell into a garden. The volcanoes still rumbled, but now they powered the cities. The acid rain was collected and converted into clean water. The radiation was captured and used for energy. By the time Hannah became governor, Busousan was home to 2.3 million people, families, children, schools, hospitals, farms that grew food in soil that had once been poison. She planted cherry trees along the main avenue of the capital city. Earth cherry trees brought across the stars as seeds. They bloomed pink and white every spring. "We make beauty from nothing," she told visitors. "That is what humans do. We take what is broken and we fix it. We take what is dead and we bring it to life." The Concord did not notice. They never noticed humans. They were too busy laughing at them. Admiral Park Junho stood at the window of his office on Earth's moon. He looked out at the stars and thought about his grandfather. About that moment of spit and silence so many years ago, he had spent his entire life serving in the Terran Defense Force. He had watched humanity grow strong in the shadows. He had seen the ships they built in secret shipyards, the weapons they developed in hidden laboratories, the soldiers they trained in underground bases. No one in the Concord knew. They never bothered to look. Why would they? Humans were weak, soft, patient. Junho smiled at that last word. Patient. His grandfather had been right. Patience was the human way. But patience was not weakness. Patience was waiting. Patience was preparing. Patience was remembering every insult, every injury, every moment of cruelty, and patience had a purpose. On his desk sat a file. Reports from dozens of colonies. Human merchants being attacked. Human settlers being driven from their homes. Human children being told they were less than animals. Junho read every report. He filed them away. He waited. He did not know when the moment would come. He did not know what would finally break 300 years of silence. But he knew it was coming. He could feel it in his bones. Humanity had been patient long enough. Soon, the galaxy would learn what that patience was for. The morning was beautiful on New Busan. Governor Shinhana woke early. She always did. She was 72 years old now, and her bones ached from decades of hard work. But she never complained. There was too much to do, too much to see, too much to love. She walked through the capital city as the sun rose over the mountains. The streets were clean and quiet. Shop owners were opening their doors. Children were walking to school, laughing and playing. Families sat in small restaurants, eating breakfast together. Hannah stopped at the main avenue and looked at her cherry trees. They were in full bloom. Pink and white petals drifted down like gentle snow. She had planted the first tree 40 years ago, when this land was still ash and poison. Now, it was paradise. A young girl ran up to her, holding a flower she had picked. "Governor Hannah, this is for you." Hannah knelt down and took the flower with both hands. "Thank you, little one. It is beautiful, just like you." The girl smiled and ran back to her mother. Hannah watched them walk away together, hand in hand. This was why she had worked so hard. This was why she had given her life to this world. For moments like this, for families, for children, for hope. She did not know that in 3 hours, most of them would be dead. The Velthary fleet arrived without warning. 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel and took position above the planet. Their weapons were already powered and ready. Hannah was in her office when she received the message. A cold voice spoke through the communication system. "This is Commander Verith of the Velthary Dominion. This star system has been reclassified as Velthary territory. All human occupants must evacuate within 6 standard hours. Any who remain will be considered hostile invaders and dealt with accordingly." Hannah stared at the screen. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady when she replied. "Commander, there are over 2 million people on this world. We have only a few transport ships. 6 hours is not enough time. We need at least a week to organize a safe evacuation." The Velthary commander's face appeared on screen. His blue skin was pale, his black eyes empty of any warmth. "You have 6 hours," he repeated. "I suggest you move quickly." The connection ended. Hannah immediately sent out emergency broadcasts. Every transport ship on the planet was ordered to prepare for departure. Families grabbed what they could carry. Roads filled with people trying to reach the landing areas. Parents carried children. Old people helped each other walk. Everyone was running, but it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. Lieutenant Commander Baek Do-yan was 4 hours away when he received the distress signal. He was on patrol aboard the frigate Gwangyedo, a small military ship meant for watching borders. It's not fighting wars. When he heard the message, his blood went cold. New Busan was under threat. His sister lived there. His niece and nephew, his mother. "Maximum speed," he ordered. "Push the engines to breaking point. I do not care if we burn out. We get there now." The ship screamed through space. Warning lights flashed. The engine room reported dangerous heat levels. Do-yan did not care. He stood at the front window, watching the stars blur past. Willing his ship to go faster, he did not make it in time. The Valkyrie did not wait 6 hours. After only 4 hours, Commander Varath gave the order. The warships opened fire. Hannah was still in the capital city. She had refused to leave. "I will be the last one off this world," she had told her staff. "Go help the others. I will stay and coordinate." She was standing in her cherry tree avenue when the first blast hit. The sky turned white. The ground shook. Buildings crumbled. People screamed. She looked up and saw fire falling from the sky. More blasts. More destruction. The schools were gone. The hospitals were gone. The farms were burning. Hannah did not run. She stood among her cherry trees, petals still falling around her, and watched her world die. She activated her communication device and recorded one final message. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "This is Governor Shinhana of New Busan. We came in peace. We asked only for fairness. We built this world from nothing. We raised our children here. We planted trees and grew gardens and made something beautiful." A blast struck nearby. The ground cracked beneath her feet. "Remember that?" she continued. "Remember that we tried. Remember that we were patient. Remember that we asked for nothing but the right to live." Another blast. Closer now. Heat washed over her face. "Remember that you chose this." The transmission ended. When Do-yan arrived, there was nothing left. The planet's surface was blackened and burned. The cities were craters. The farms were ash. The cherry trees were gone. He searched for survivors for 12 hours. His crew found a few thousand people who had escaped on transport ships, a few hundred who had hidden in underground shelters. Out of 2.3 million people, fewer than 10,000 survived. His sister was not among them. Neither were his niece and nephew. Neither was his mother. Do-yan sat alone in his quarters that night. He did not cry. He did not scream. He felt empty, hollow, like something inside him had died along with everyone on New Busan. He played the final message from Governor Hannah. He listened to her calm voice, her steady words, her simple request. "Remember, the Galactic Concord held an emergency meeting 3 days later. The Valkyrie claimed they had acted within their rights. The system had been reclassified through proper legal channels. The humans had been given warning. It was not the Dominion's fault that they had failed to leave in time. No one argued. No one objected. The Concord sent a formal letter to the Terran Republic expressing concern over the tragic loss of life. They suggested that humans should be more careful about settling in disputed territories in the future. That was all. A letter, concern, nothing more. Admiral Park Jin-ho read the letter in his office. He read it 3 times. Then he set it down and closed his eyes. He thought about his grandfather, wiping spit from his hand with quiet dignity. He thought about Captain Yoon Min-ji, recording every insult in her personal log. He thought about Governor Shinhana, standing in her cherry tree avenue as fire rained down. He thought about 300 years of patience, 300 years of hope that someday, somehow, the galaxy would accept them. 300 years of believing that if they just tried hard enough, worked hard enough, suffered long enough, things would change. Things were going to change now. But not in the way the Concorde expected. Junho stood and walked to his window. Outside, he could see ships moving in the darkness of space. Human ships. Thousands of them. He had spent his entire life preparing for this moment, hoping it would never come. Knowing that it would, the patience was over. Now came the reckoning. For 6 months, humanity disappeared. It happened slowly at first. Human trade ships returned to their home ports and did not leave again. Human merchants closed their shops in alien stations and went home. Human diplomats packed their belongings and boarded transports back to Terran space. The borders of human territory sealed shut. No ships in. No ships out. No communication. No explanation, just silence. The Galactic Concorde noticed, but they did not care. The Kethmari ambassador laughed about it at a diplomatic dinner. "The soft ones are sulking," he said, raising his glass. "Let them cry in their corners. They will come crawling back when they get hungry enough." Everyone laughed. Everyone agreed. Humans were weak, emotional. They were throwing a tantrum like children. They would give up soon enough, deep beneath the frozen surface of Europa. One of Jupiter's moons, Intelligence Director Song Yanji, had not slept in 72 hours. She sat in the central command center of humanity's most secret military base. Surrounded by screens showing information from across human space, she was 58 years old. With gray hair, she no longer bothered to die, and eyes that had seen too much. For 30 years, she had run humanity's intelligence network. She knew every secret, every hidden shipyard, every underground laboratory, every weapon that humanity had developed while the galaxy laughed at them. Now it was time to use them all. "Report from Sector 7, one of her officers announced. "The shipyards at Titan have completed another 30 vessels. That brings the total fleet count to 11,800. Young-ji nodded. "Tell them to push for 12,000 by the end of the month. We need every ship we can build," another officer spoke up. "The weapons laboratories on Mars report successful testing of the new energy shields. They performed beyond expected levels. Enemy weapons will have difficulty breaking through.
Good.
Begin mass production immediately. Every ship gets the new shields." A third officer approached with a tablet. "Director, we have a problem. Our spy network in Velthary space has gone dark. We think they may have been discovered." Yunji took the tablet and studied the information. Her face showed no emotion. "Then we work with what we have. We know their fleet positions. We know their defense systems. That will be enough." All across human space, the same scene repeated itself. Factories that had been building farming equipment switched to producing weapons. Mining stations that had been collecting resources for sale began stockpiling materials for war. Training facilities that had produced scientists and engineers started creating soldiers. 300 years of work. 300 years of preparation. Everything humanity had built in secret was now coming to light. Admiral Park Junho stood before the strategic commands, War Council on a space station orbiting Earth. Room was full of the highest-ranking officers in the Terran military. Men and women who had spent their lives waiting for this moment. Jono looked at their faces. He saw anger, pain, determination. He saw the same fire that burned in his own heart. "Our ancestors came from a world that tried to kill them," he began. "Ice ages that froze the land. Diseases that killed millions. Predators that hunted them in the dark. Wars that nearly destroyed everything they built." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Every time the universe tried to break humanity, we survived. We adapted. We grew stronger. We remembered what hurt us, and we made sure it would never hurt us again." He activated a holographic display. The room filled with light as images of ships appeared. Thousands of ships. More ships than the Concorde had ever seen in one fleet. "They called us patient," Junho continued. "They were right. We are patient. But they forgot what patience is for. He looked at Captain Yoon Minji, who sat in the front row. The woman who had recorded every insult for 20 years. Her face was like stone. Patience is for waiting, he said. Waiting until you are ready. Waiting until the moment is right. He looked at Lieutenant Commander Baek Do-yeon, promoted to captain after New Busousan, the man who had lost his entire family. His eyes were empty but focused. Patience is for preparing, building your strength when no one is watching, learning from your enemies while they laugh at you. He looked at Colonel Kang Sun-woo, the head of ground forces, a man who had trained soldiers in secret for decades. Patience is for remembering every insult, every injury, every life they took, every moment of cruelty. Gunho turned off the display and faced his officers directly. We have been patient for 300 years. We have waited. We have prepared. We have remembered everything. He let the silence hang in the air. Now it is time to show them what patience was for. The planning took weeks. Every target was identified. Every enemy position was mapped. Every weakness was found and noted. Captain Mingi studied the Velthari defense grid until she knew it better than the Velthari did. She found the gaps in their sensors, the blind spots in their weapon coverage, the communication relays that could be destroyed to leave them confused and alone. Captain Do-yeon planned the ground operations. Liberation of occupied human colonies. Rescue of human prisoners. Destruction of enemy bases. He was calm and precise. He did not let emotion cloud his judgment. He saved his anger for the battlefield. Colonel Sun-woo prepared the soldiers. Millions of men and women who had volunteered to fight. They trained day and night. They learned to move in silence, to strike without warning, to fight like their ancestors had fought on Earth thousands of years ago. Director Yoonji coordinated everything. She watched the information flow from every corner of human space. She tracked the enemy. She predicted their movements. She made sure that when the attack came, it would be perfect. And Admiral Junho waited. He was patient. He had learned patience from his grandfather, who had wiped spit from his hand with quiet dignity. He had learned patience from 300 years of human suffering. But patience had a limit, and that limit had been reached. 6 months after New Busan burned, the preparations were complete. 12,000 warships. 3 million soldiers. Weapons that the Concord had never imagined. Technology that humanity had developed in secret in the places no one wanted. While the galaxy ignored them, Junho stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Remembrance. Named for the 1.8 million who had died. Named for the 300 years of insults. Named for everything humanity had suffered. He looked out at the fleet spread before him, the largest military force in human history. Ready to remind the galaxy that patience was not weakness? All ships, he said quietly, prepare to move. Silence was over. The thunder was about to begin. The Velthari Dominion had 14 major military stations, spread across their territory. Each one was protected by hundreds of warships. Each one was armed with enough weapons to destroy a planet. Each one had stood for 1,000 years, never challenged, never threatened. In 47 minutes, humanity destroyed all of them. Commander Yoon Minji led the assault on Velthor Prime, the heart of the Dominion. Her fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at exactly the planned moment. 3,000 ships appearing from nowhere, moving in perfect coordination. The Velthari defense grid activated instantly. Alarms screamed across their stations. Officers shouted orders. Weapons powered up and began firing, but the human ships were not where the Velthari expected them to be. Minji had studied their defense systems for months. She knew every sensor, every weapon, every blind spot. She had planned the approach so carefully that the Velthari scanners could not lock onto her ships. First wave. Engage, she ordered calmly. 1,000 ships broke formation and attacked the outer defense satellites. They moved like nothing the Velthari had ever seen. Not in straight lines. Not in predictable patterns. They moved like water, flowing around obstacles, finding gaps, striking at weak points. The Velthari commander screamed into his communicator, What are they doing? How are they moving like that? No one had an answer. On Earth, long ago, humans had hunted for millions of years. They had learned patience from waiting for prey. They had learned coordination from working together. They had learned to read their enemies, to predict their movements, to strike at exactly the right moment. The Velthari had never needed to hunt. They had always been the strongest. They had always won through pure force. They did not understand an enemy that moved like wolves, silent and deadly, working together as one. Within 20 minutes, the outer defenses were gone. Within 30 minutes, the orbital stations were burning. Within 40 minutes, the Velthari fleet was scattered and broken. Commander Vareth, same officer who had destroyed New Busan, tried to escape on his personal ship. Mingi tracked him herself. She could have destroyed him with a single shot. Instead, she disabled his engines and left him floating in space. Let him watch, she told her crew. Let him see what his cruelty has brought. Across Velthari space, the same story repeated. Every military installation, every defensive position, every symbol of Velthari power, all of them fell. Fast, clean, precise. Captain Beek Doyan did not fight in space. His job was on the ground. For 300 years, the Velthari had occupied several human colonies. They had taken them by force. They had enslaved the human populations. They had treated them as less than animals. Doyon was going to set them free. His transport ships landed on the occupied world of Horizon. 50,000 soldiers poured out, moving through the streets like ghosts. They had trained for this. They had prepared for this. They knew every building, every street, every hiding place. The Velthari guards did not understand what was happening. One moment, everything was quiet. The next moment, human soldiers were everywhere, moving too fast to track, fighting with a fury that the Velthari had never expected from soft meat. Doyon himself led the assault on the main prison complex. This was where they kept the most dangerous human prisoners. The ones who had dared to fight back, the ones who had refused to accept slavery. He broke down the doors and stepped inside. The cells were dark and dirty. The prisoners were thin and weak, but their eyes were bright when they saw human soldiers. "You came," one of them whispered. An old woman with white hair and scars on her face. "They told us no one would ever come, that humanity had forgotten us." Doyon knelt beside her and took her hand. "We never forget," he said. "We just take our time." He thought of his sister, his niece and nephew, his mother. He could not save them, but he could save these people. He could make sure that no human would ever suffer under Velthari rule again. Liberation took 3 days. Every occupied world, every prison, every slave camp. Human soldiers freed every human they could find. They did not destroy needlessly. They did not kill those who surrendered. They were not cruel, but they were not merciful either. The Velthari, who had committed the worst crimes, were captured and held for trial. The ones who had followed orders were given a choice: leave peacefully or face consequences. Most chose to leave. The message was clear. Humanity could be gentle, but humanity would never be weak again. Colonel Kung Sunhwa delivered the final message. 1 week after the attack began, the Galactic Concord called an emergency meeting. Representatives from all 17 species gathered in the Grand Chamber, massive hall at the center of the Concord's capital station. They were afraid. For the first time in 1,000 years, they were truly afraid. Sunwoo walked into the chamber alone. He was 55 years old, with a soldier's build and a face that showed no emotion. He wore a simple uniform. No medals, no decorations. Just the symbol of the Terran Republic on his shoulder. The Concord representatives watched him in silence. The Kethmari, who had called humans soft meat. The Dralvians, who had cheated human merchants. The Velthari, who had burned New Busan. All of them. Staring at this single human, wondering what he would say. Sunwoo stood at the center of the chamber. He did not speak immediately. He let them wait. Let them feel what humanity had felt for 300 years. Then he activated a holographic display. A woman's face appeared. Governor Shinhana, her final message began to play, came in peace. We asked only for fairness. We built this world from nothing. We raised our children here. We planted trees and grew gardens and made something beautiful. The chamber was silent. No one moved. Remember that? Remember that we tried? Remember that we were patient. Remember that you chose this. The recording ended. Sunwoo looked at the assembled representatives. For 300 years you treated our patience as weakness, he said. His voice was calm, not angry, not threatening. Just stating facts. You spat on us. You cheated us. You laughed at us. You gave us the worst worlds and expected us to die quietly. Paused. We did not die. We built. We grew. We learned. And we remembered everything. A Kethmari representative stood up. This is an act of war. You cannot sit down, Sunwoo said quietly. The Kethmari sat. The Velthari Dominion is dissolved, Sunwoo continued. Their military power is broken. Their occupied worlds are free. This is not negotiable. He looked around the chamber, meeting each set of alien eyes. Any species that wishes to continue as before is welcome to try. But understand this, humanity does not forget. We do not forgive without reason, and we no longer wait. He turned and walked toward the exit. At the door, he stopped and looked back. We offered peace for 300 years. You refused? Now we will have peace on our terms. The galaxy will never forget this moment. Neither will we. He left the chamber in silence. No one tried to stop him. 10 years passed. The galaxy was different now. The Galactic Concord still existed, but everything had changed. The old rules were gone. The old powers were broken. A new order had risen from the ashes of the old, and at the center of that order stood humanity, not because they demanded it, not because they forced it, simply because no one dared to suggest otherwise. Admiral Park Jun-ho retired on a spring morning when the cherry trees were in bloom. He was 80 years old and his body was tired, but his heart was at peace. He had chosen to live on New Busousan. The world had been rebuilt. Where there had been craters, there were now cities. Where there had been ash, there were now gardens. Where 1.8 million people had died, 3 million now lived. They had named the capital city Hana, after the governor who had died among her cherry trees. Junho walked slowly down the main avenue, the same avenue where Shinhana had made her final stand. Cherry trees lined both sides, their pink and white petals falling like gentle snow. At the end of the avenue stood a memorial, a simple stone wall with 1.8 million names carved into it. Every year, representatives from across the galaxy came to this place. Kethmari, Drelvians, even Velthari. They came to lay flowers and to remember. They came to understand what their arrogance had cost. Junho stopped at the wall and ran his fingers over the names. So many names. So many lives lost. So much pain that could have been avoided if the galaxy had simply treated humanity with basic respect. He thought about his grandfather, the old man who had wiped spit from his hand and taught a 12-year-old boy about patience. He had died 30 years ago, peaceful in his sleep, knowing that his grandson would finish what he had started. We did it, grandfather, Junho whispered to the stone. We made them remember. Fleet Commander Yoon Minji did not retire. She could not. There was too much work to do. After the war, the Concord had asked humanity to lead the new Joint Defense Initiative. It was not a request they could easily refuse. Someone needed to protect the younger species, the weaker civilizations. From those who might repeat the mistakes of the past, Minji was chosen to lead. The woman who had recorded every insult for 20 years. The woman who had destroyed the Velthari defense grid in less than an hour. The woman the Kethmari now called the Patient Storm. She stood on the bridge of her new flagship, looking out at a fleet of ships from a dozen species. They had come together under human leadership, not because humanity had conquered them, but because humanity had proven something important. Patience was not weakness. Mercy was not foolishness. The species that had suffered most had also shown the greatest restraint. They had not destroyed the Velthari. They had not enslaved their enemies. They had simply demanded fairness and made sure they received it. Minji allowed herself a small smile as she watched the mixed fleet performing training exercises. This was what the galaxy could be. Different species working together, respecting each other, learning from each other. It had taken 300 years of pain to reach this moment. But they had reached it. General Baekdoyan left the military after the war. He had seen enough fighting, enough death, enough pain. He became a writer instead. His book, Patience and Fire, told the story of humanity's journey. From the first contact with the Concorde to the destruction of New Busan to the final reckoning, it was not a story of victory. It was a story of survival, of hope, of what happens when a species refuses to give up. The book became required reading at every military academy in the galaxy. Young officers from 100 species studied human tactics and strategy. But more importantly, they studied human character. They learned that true strength was not about weapons or ships or armies. True strength was about endurance, about faith, about standing up again after being knocked down, about believing in a better future even when the present was dark. Doyan spoke at academies and universities across the Concorde. He told students about his sister, his niece and nephew, his mother. He told them about Governor Shinhana and her cherry trees. He told them about the 1.8 million who had died. We fight so that others do not have to, he would say. We remember so that history does not repeat. We forgive when forgiveness is earned. But we never forget. Forgetting is how tragedies happen again. Ambassador Kong Sunwoo spent his final years working with the young. He traveled to Velthari schools and taught children who had grown up hearing horror stories about humans. In one classroom, young Velthari girl raised her hand. Her blue skin was pale with nervousness. Her black eyes were wide with curiosity. "Ambassador," she said, "were humans always this strong?" Sunwoo sat down so he could look at her directly. He thought about his grandmother, who had been turned away from alien hospitals because humans were unclean. He thought about his father, who had worked triple shifts to pay unfair taxes. He thought about all the generations of humans who had suffered and endured and waited. "No," he said gently, "we were not always this strong. We were made strong, Ayu, by everyone who pushed us, everyone who hurt us, everyone who laughed at us and told us we were nothing." He reached out and took her small blue hand in his. "Oh, you taught us what we were capable of. You showed us that we could survive anything, build anything, overcome anything." The young Velthari looked at him with something like awe. "Are you still angry at us?" Sunwoo shook his head. "Anger fades. Pain heals. What remains is understanding. We understand now why we suffered. We understand what it made us. And we hope that you will learn from our story without having to live through your own." He looked out the window at a galaxy that had changed forever. A galaxy that would never forget the moment humanity's patience finally broke. "Be kind to others," he told the children. "Be fair. Be patient. Remember that every species has strength you cannot see. Remember that the quiet ones may be waiting. Remember that mercy is not weakness." He smiled, and for a moment, he looked like the tired old soldier he was. "We hope you never have to learn that lesson the way we learned it. We hope our story is enough." 70 years later, the galaxy had grown peaceful. New species joined the Concorde. Old hatreds faded. The dark days were history now. It's taught in schools and remembered in memorials. On the anniversary of New Busan, beings from across the galaxy gathered to honor the fallen. They stood among cherry trees that had grown from seeds planted by Shinhana herself. They read the names on the memorial wall. They promised to remember. A young human child asked her grandmother why they did this every year, why they remembered such painful things. The old woman knelt down and took her granddaughter's hands. "'Cause remembering is how we honor the dead," she said. "And learning is how we protect the living. Our ancestors were patient for 300 years. They suffered so that we could live in peace. The least we can do is remember their names." The child nodded solemnly. "Will it ever happen again?" The grandmother looked up at the stars, at the ships of a dozen species flying peacefully overhead, at a galaxy that had learned, at great cost, to treat all beings with respect. No, she said. Because now everyone remembers. Everyone knows. And no one will ever forget the moment humanity's patience finally broke.